Hello everyone, I am Amin. Welcome to BYK Book Summary. Here we decide the mindset and story of the world's most successful icon and the most powerful books that saved them. Our mission is to bring you deep insight, your personal growth. Joining me to simplify this concept is my AI research co-host. Let's dive into today's journey of knowledge.
Have you ever found yourself just highly motivated on a Sunday evening? Like you're carefully prepping meals and promising yourself that this week, you're finally going to stick to that new diet.
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there with the Sunday motivation.
Right. But then you find yourself eating cold pizza over the sink by Tuesday night.
Yeah, Tuesday's usually when it falls apart.
Exactly.
Yep.
Or, maybe you've looked at your bank statement and realized you're still paying for a language learning app that you haven't opened since like 2024.
The aspirational subscriptions, those are the worst.
They really are. And well, if you lead a team, you've probably experienced the sheer frustration of rolling out a new software system, one that is just objectively better and faster.
But your team fights it with, like, the kind of ferocity usually reserved for mortal enemies?
Yes, they just refuse to adopt it. So I want you, the listener, to think about those specific moments of failure right now. Because the default human reaction to that kind of failure is it's immense guilt.
It is. We just immediately blame ourselves.
All right, we tell ourselves we lack discipline. We tell ourselves we're just lazy. But if you are nodding along to any of this right now, let's get this out of the way immediately. Those failures are not character flaws.
Not at all.
You are not broken. You are just experiencing the reality of a misunderstood brain trying to navigate a world it just wasn't strictly evolved to handle. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're tearing apart the mechanics of human behavior to understand why making changes, both big and small, feels so excruciatingly difficult. And, how we can actually engineer our way out of that friction.
It really is the universal human struggle, isn't it? I mean, every single day you are either trying to alter your own behavior or you're trying to influence the behavior of a partner, a child, or a colleague.
Constantly, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So what are we using as our guide today?
Right. To get to the bottom of why this is so hard, we are using the framework laid out by Chip and Dan Heath in their book, Switch: How to Change Things When Change is Hard.
Such a great book.
It is. And what makes this specific framework so vital is that it completely strips away the moral weight of failing to change.
Which is a huge relief, honestly.
Exactly. It replaces that heavy guilt of, I didn't try hard enough, with a highly mechanical, almost structural understanding of what is happening neurologically and psychologically.
So we're really looking under the hood today.
We are. We're going to look at the internal tug of war happening inside your mind, and more importantly, how to rig that game so you actually win.
Okay, I love that.
Right.
And to do that, we have to start with the central analogy that the Heaths borrow from the psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah, the hate analogy is foundational.
It really is. It's an image that once you hear it, it just completely reorients how you view every decision you make. So I want you to imagine a path.
Okay, a path.
And walking down that path is a massive 6-ton elephant.
It's a big animal.
Right. And sitting on top of that elephant, holding the reins, is a human rider.
It's such a brilliant visualization because it maps so perfectly onto our neurobiology, and you don't even need a medical degree to understand it.
Let's break that down for the listener. What exactly does the rider represent?
So if we break it down, the rider sitting on top represents our rational, conscious mind.
The thinker.
Exactly. If we map this to the brain, we're largely talking about the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of you that, runs cost-benefit analyses, plans for retirement, understands abstract concepts.
It's the part that sets an alarm for 5:30 a.m. to go to the gym.
Yes. It is entirely future-oriented. The rider loves a spreadsheet.
Okay, so that's the rider. What about the elephant? I assume that's the part of me that hits snooze at 5:30 a.m.
You nailed it. The elephant beneath the rider represents our emotional mind. This is driven by the limbic system and the basal ganglia.
And the elephant doesn't care about the future.
Right. Not at all. The elephant doesn't care about 10 years from now. It cares about right now. It processes immediate sensory input.
So it's very reactive.
Highly reactive. It is driven by pain avoidance and pleasure seeking. And because of that, It is highly resistant to any change that requires psychological effort or discomfort.
Makes sense.
Mm.
And then the third element is the path they're walking on.
Right. The path they are traveling on simply represents your environment, the physical, social, and structural situation you're operating within.
Okay, so on the surface, this dynamic seems pretty clear. Like the rider looks like the one in charge.
Sure, they're sitting on top.
Yeah, the rider's elevated, holding the reins, literally steering the beast. But I always look at that dynamic like someone trying to stop a runaway freight train with a handbrake from a bicycle.
That is a very accurate way to look at it.
Because the reality is the rider only appears to be in control. As long as the rider and the elephant agree on the direction, everything looks super smooth.
But the moment there's a disagreement...
Right. The moment the rider says, hey, we need to eat this kale salad, and the elephant says, I am stressed and I want a donut, the elephant wins.
Every single time.
A 6-ton emotional beast is going to walk wherever it wants to walk.
Yeah.
But wait, let me push back on this a bit.
Go for it.
If the rider is so smart and logical, and we know we have these rational goals, why do we still try to use willpower to force change? Like, society just worships willpower.
Oh, we absolutely do. It directly challenges the most pervasive myth we have about self-improvement, which is, like you said, the cult of willpower. We live in a culture that idolizes sheer grinding discipline.
Yeah, just do it.
Exactly. But relying on willpower is simply asking the rider to wrestle the elephant. And it is a biological mismatch.
How so? Like, biologically speaking?
Well, from a neurological standpoint, the prefrontal cortex, the rider, is a massive energy hog.
Oh, really? It burns a lot of energy?
Tons. It burns through glucose at an astonishing rate when it's exercising executive control. The limbic system, on the other hand, the elephant, is ancient, highly efficient, and metabolically cheap.
So we're talking about what psychologists call ego depletion.
Precisely. Ego depletion.
The idea that willpower is just a finite resource that physically drains over the course of a day.
Exactly. Let's look at a standard Tuesday for the listener. You wake up, your rider is fully rested.
Feel good?
Right. You successfully choose oatmeal over a pastry for breakfast.
That's 1 point for the rider.
Yep. Then you drive to work and someone cuts you off in traffic. Your rider successfully suppresses the urge to lean on the horn and scream.
Okay, burning more glucose there.
Lots of it. Then you sit in a 2-hour meeting where, let's say, a colleague takes credit for your work.
Oh, that's infuriating.
It is. And your rider has to force you to smile and be professional instead of, throwing a chair across the room.
Right, so by the time you get off work...
By 6:00 p.m., your prefrontal cortex is completely exhausted. It has no energy left to wrestle.
It's just done.
Totally done. So when you get home, the elephant, which is stressed from the day and craving the immediate dopamine hit of comfort, wanders straight to the couch and demands takeout.
And the rider's just too weak to pull the reins.
Exactly. If your strategy for change relies solely on the rider's strength, you have a 100% failure rate over a long enough timeline.
Wow. That makes so much sense, and honestly, it makes me feel a lot better about ordering takeout on Tuesdays.
It should. It's biology, not character.
Which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. If willpower is just a biological dead end, what is the alternative?
Right. How do we actually do this?
Exactly. The Heats argue that to create lasting change, you have to stop relying on muscle and start directing the system. You have to address all 3 elements of Haight's analogy.
You can't just pick one.
Right. You have to direct the rider, you have to motivate the elephant, and you have to shape the path. Leave one out, and the whole mechanism just grinds to a halt.
It falls apart.
So let's start with the rider. Because if the rider is the analytical, smart part of the brain, you would assume its job is the easiest, right?
You would think so.
It has the spreadsheet, it knows the facts, but the rider has a massive fatal flaw.
A huge blind spot. The rider is fundamentally wired to look for problems.
Is constantly looking for what's wrong.
Exactly. From an evolutionary perspective, focusing on what is broken or dangerous or risky, that kept our ancestors alive.
Because if you missed a threat, you died.
Right. You didn't survive by marveling at how beautiful the sunset was. You survived by intensely analyzing the rustling in the bushes.
That makes sense.
But today, that evolutionary trait manifests as a relentless focus on the negative. When faced with a complex situation, the rider will obsessively catalog every single thing that is going wrong.
It just zeroes in on the flaws.
Yes. It will endlessly debate the nuances of the problem, write 50-page reports about the problem, and hold countless meetings about the problem.
And this leads straight into analysis paralysis.
The ultimate trap.
I want to point this out specifically to you, the listener. Because if you're the type of person who listens to long-form analysis to get smarter, your writer is probably incredibly dominant.
You are definitely a learner.
Exactly. You are a learner. You probably love gathering data. But that strength is also a trap. I mean, think about it. How often have you spent 3 weeks reading reviews for the absolute best organizational software?
Oh, guilty.
Right. Creating pros and cons lists, watching YouTube tutorials. But at the end of the day, you haven't actually organized a single file on your desktop.
Because your writer has confused analyzing the problem with actually solving the problem.
Exactly. So how do we fix that?
Well, the strategy that Heath proposed here is a complete inversion of our natural instinct. If the writer is stuck obsessing over what is broken, you have to forcefully redirect its attention to what they call bright spots.
Bright spots. What exactly are those?
Bright spots are the anomalies. They are the small pockets of success that are already occurring, even within a massive, seemingly intractable problem.
Okay, so looking for the good stuff.
Right. The instruction to the writer is no longer find out what is wrong and fix it. The new instruction is find out what is working and clone it.
I am so glad you brought that up because the book illustrates this with a story that completely changed how I look at problem solving.
The Vietnam story.
Yes, the Jerry Sternin case study. Let's go back to the 1990s. An American researcher named Jerry Sternin is working for Save the Children, and he gets sent to rural Vietnam.
A very tough assignment.
It's extremely. The government gives him this daunting mandate: solve the catastrophic crisis of child malnutrition in these villages.
Which is just a massive systemic issue.
Huge. And oh, by the way, he has essentially no staff, he has basically no money, and he has exactly 6 months to show results before his visa expires.
It is the ultimate impossible situation.
Totally impossible.
Now let's consider what a classic writer-driven approach would look like here.
Yeah.
If you send a team of brilliant analysts to those villages, what do they study?
Well, they'd study the problems, right? They'd study the poverty.
Exactly. They analyze the lack of clean water, they look at the terrible sanitation infrastructure, the widespread illiteracy, the lack of arable land.
And the thing is, their analysis would be 100% factually correct. Like, all of those things are definitely contributing to malnutrition.
They are completely correct, but they are what Sternin called true but useless facts.
True but useless. TBU.
TBU. It is true that systemic poverty causes malnutrition, but that knowledge is totally useless to a guy with no budget and 6 months on his visa.
Because he can't fix poverty in 6 months.
Right. He cannot build a new water treatment facility. He cannot rewrite the macroeconomic policy of Vietnam. If he focuses on the problems, he hits immediate analysis paralysis. The problems are simply too big.
So what does Sternin do? He just ignores the poverty entirely.
He has to.
Instead of asking why millions of children are malnourished, he goes into the villages and asks a radically different question. He asks, are there any kids here who are very poor, but perfectly healthy?
He went looking for the bright spots.
Yes. And he found them. There were a handful of children living in the exact same impoverished, unsanitary conditions who were somehow thriving.
And by finding those specific children, Sternin completely eliminated the environment as an excuse.
That is such a key point.
It really is. If one mother can raise a healthy child in this exact village with the exact same lack of resources, then it is mathematically possible for the other mothers to do it too.
Right, because there's no magic outside money coming in for that one kid.
Exactly. The solution didn't require outside intervention. It was already hidden inside the community.
And the specific behaviors he uncovered are fascinating because they went entirely against the local culture.
What did he find?
Well, when he observed the mothers of the healthy kids, he noticed 2 major differences. First, the cultural norm in the village was to feed children 2 large meals a day.
Okay, 2 big meals.
But these bright spot mothers were taking the exact same amount of daily rice and breaking it up into 4 smaller meals.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And second, they were going out to the rice paddies and foraging for tiny shrimp, crabs, and sweet potato greens and mixing them into the kids' rice.
Let's look at the biological mechanics of why that worked, because it's brilliant. A severely malnourished child has a shrunken, weakened stomach.
Yay.
If you give them a massive bowl of rice twice a day, their bodies simply cannot process and absorb the nutrients. Most of it just passes right through.
Which is heartbreaking, but biologically true.
But if you feed them the same total volume across 4 smaller meals, their digestive system can actually metabolize it.
That makes total sense. And what about the greens and the shrimp?
Well, sweet potato greens were culturally considered a low-class food, like something you feed to animals, not children.
Oh, interesting.
But nutritionally, they provided the exact vitamins the children were missing, while the tiny shrimp provided essential protein.
But wait, let me push back on how Sternin actually implemented this, because knowing the bright spot isn't the same as changing the culture.
Absolutely not. Knowledge isn't behavior.
Right. If Sternin just printed out a pamphlet that said, hey, feed your kids 4 times a day and add some swamp shrimp, the writer might read it, but the elephant would completely reject it.
Oh, the elephant would hate it.
Yeah, it violates their cultural norms. It feels wrong to feed them animal food.
And that is precisely why Sternin didn't distribute pamphlets. He didn't make an intellectual appeal to the writer at all.
So what did he do?
Instead, he organized small cooking groups in the villages. He required the mothers of malnourished children to show up and actually bring the shrimp and greens with them.
Ah, active participation.
Yes. And he had the bright spot mothers, their peers, teach the group how to cook these new meals.
So he made them act out the change before they even fully bought into it intellectually.
Exactly. He created a new social environment. The mothers experienced the cooking. They saw their peers doing it. They saw their children eating the food and getting stronger.
It became real to them.
The change wasn't theoretical anymore. It was tangible.
Yeah.
And because it relied entirely on local resources and local knowledge, it bypassed the usual resistance to foreign interference.
And the results were just unprecedented. Within 6 months, malnutrition in those targeted villages dropped by 65%.
65% in 6 months with no new money.
It is a stunning outcome. And if we pull that back to you, listening right now, the application is profound.
Oh, so?
Well, when you're facing a massive roadblock at work or a persistent issue in your relationship, your writer is going to want to write a 10-page mental thesis on everything your partner does wrong, or everything the company is failing at.
Which is just the true but useless trap all over again.
Exactly. You have to interrupt that cycle. You have to ask yourself, when was the last time this actually worked, even for 5 minutes? What were the conditions of that bright spot, and how can I artificially recreate those conditions tomorrow?
It shifts your brain from defensive analysis to proactive replication. It's a game changer.
It really is.
But, as you hinted at earlier with the cooking classes, directing the writer is only 1/3 of the puzzle.
Right. We still have the elephant.
Exactly. The writer can have the map, the writer can see the bright spot clearly. But if the elephant refuses to take a step, you are still paralyzed. We have to figure out how to motivate the 6-ton emotional beast.
And this is where the framework gets into the messy reality of human emotion. Because the Heaths make it very clear. The elephant does not respond to facts.
Never has, never will.
It doesn't care about the spreadsheet showing the compounding interest of your 401k. It doesn't care about the medical journal explaining the long-term benefits of cardiovascular health.
Because you cannot think your way into a new behavior. You have to feel your way there.
Feel your way there. I like that.
It's the truth. We operate under this delusion that information drives action. But if knowledge were enough, nobody would smoke. Every doctor would be incredibly fit, and financial advisors would never declare bankruptcy.
That is a harsh but very fair point.
The elephant is driven by immediate emotional resonance. It moves toward positive emotion, pride, hope, excitement, connection, and it violently recoils from negative emotion. Things like fear, anxiety, overwhelm, and feeling incompetent.
Okay, let's apply this directly to the biggest behavioral monster most of us face: procrastination.
Oh, the classic elephant problem.
Right. Whether it's putting off a massive work project, avoiding a difficult conversation, or staring at a garage that has been accumulating junk since, like, 2018.
We all have that garage. Or a closet.
Exactly. Is procrastination just the elephant looking at a task, feeling a massive surge of negative emotion, and just refusing to move?
That is exactly the mechanism. We often mislabel procrastination as a time management problem or a character defect. We call ourselves lazy.
We do. We beat ourselves up over it.
But neurologically, procrastination is an emotion regulation problem.
An emotion regulation problem. Explain that.
Okay, when you look at that garage full of junk, your brain perceives a massive, complex, ambiguous task. The amygdala registers that ambiguity and effort as a psychological threat.
So it's literally triggering an alarm system in your brain.
Yes, it triggers a feeling of dread and overwhelm. The elephant, wanting to escape that negative feeling, immediately looks for a soothing, low-effort alternative.
Oh, so that's why you suddenly feel an overwhelming urge to organize your digital photos instead.
Exactly. or scroll through social media for 2 hours. The elephant is simply seeking immediate emotional relief from the dread of the garage.
Wow. Okay, so how do we outsmart a threat detection system that is millions of years old?
The strategy the book offers is something called shrinking the change.
Shrinking the change.
Right. If the elephant is terrified of the size of the mountain, you have to put a giant piece of cardboard in front of its face so it can only see the next 3 feet of the trail.
I love that visual. So you just hide the mountain.
You have to lower the threshold of activation so drastically that the task no longer triggers the amygdala's alarm bells.
So what does that look like practically?
If the goal is clean the entire garage, the elephant panics. If you shrink the change, the goal becomes take 2 cardboard boxes to the recycling bin. That is it.
See, I struggle with this.
Why is that?
Because I know the psychology behind it, right? But my rider is too smart for the trick.
Ah, the skeptical rider.
Yeah. If I tell myself, I'm just going to put on my running shoes and walk to the mailbox, my rider knows full well that it's a trap and that the real goal is a 5-mile run.
It feels patronizing, doesn't it?
It does. It feels patronizing to my own brain. How does shrinking the change actually work if you know you are manipulating yourself?
It's a really great pushback, and it highlights a common misunderstanding of the technique. Shrinking the change only works if you genuinely give yourself permission to stop after that tiny step.
Wait, what?
Yes. If you put on your running shoes, walk to the mailbox, and then tell yourself, okay, you're out here, now you have to run 5 miles, your elephant learns that you are a liar.
Oh, I see.
The next time you try the trick, the elephant won't budge. You have to legitimately make the goal just the mailbox. If you reach the mailbox and decide to go back inside, you must claim that as a complete victory.
Wait, really? So I just walk to the mailbox, go back inside, take the shoes off, and I consider that a successful workout?
Yes, because you are not trying to burn calories in that moment. You are trying to rewire a neurological pathway.
Oh, okay. That's a huge distinction.
You are training the basal ganglia, the part of the brain responsible for habit formation, that the act of putting on shoes and stepping outside is safe. It is not painful.
You're proving to the elephant that there's no threat.
Precisely. You are engineering a micro-success. When you complete that tiny step, your brain releases a small pulse of dopamine.
And dopamine is the reward chemical.
Right. That dopamine creates a feeling of accomplishment and hope. You are feeding the elephant positive emotion.
So it builds on itself.
It does. After a few days of successfully walking to the mailbox without dread, the elephant starts to feel confident. It starts to think, well, I'm already out here. I guess I could jog to the end of the block.
The momentum becomes self-generating.
Exactly. But it only happens if the initial step is so small, it doesn't trigger the fear response.
Okay, you are replacing the feeling of dread with the feeling of progress.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, shrinking the change is about removing negative emotion.
Right.
But the Heaths also talk about injecting a massive amount of positive motivation, and they do this through something called identity appeal.
Yes, identity appeal. This is perhaps the deepest psychological lever we have.
How does that differ from the writer's logic?
Well, the writer evaluates a decision based on a consequence model. It asks, if I do X, then Y will happen. Is the cost worth the benefit?
Like a transaction.
Exactly. But the elephant doesn't care about spreadsheets or transactions. The elephant operates on an identity model.
So it's about who you are.
Right. When faced with a choice, the elephant essentially asks 3 subconscious questions. Who am I? What kind of situation is this? And what does a person like me do in a situation like this?
I love this because it completely changes the language we use internally. The book references a famous study in political science regarding voter turnout that illustrates this perfectly.
Yes, the voting study.
Researchers took 2 groups of people the day before an election. With the first group, they used verb-based language. They asked, how important is it to you to vote in tomorrow's election?
They are asking about an action.
Right.
And an action is something that requires effort. The writer immediately starts calculating, well, I have to find my polling place, I have to wait in line, it might rain. It feels like a chore.
Exactly. It's an exhausting calculation.
Yeah.
But with the second group, they changed one word.
Mm-hmm.
They used a noun.
A tiny change.
Tiny. They asked, how important is it to you to be a voter in tomorrow's election?
And the results were statistically massive. Turnout among the group asked to be a voter was significantly higher.
Just from one word change.
Because a verb to vote is an activity you can choose to do or not do. But a noun, a voter, is an identity. It speaks directly to the elephant's sense of self.
It's tapping into who they believe they are.
Exactly. If you see yourself as a good, responsible citizen and someone offers you the identity of voter, you accept it. And once the elephant accepts an identity, it will naturally alter its behavior to align with that identity to avoid cognitive dissonance.
Because a voter votes.
Right. It isn't a chore, it is an expression of who they are.
Think about how you can use this in your own life right now, listener. The language you use internally is either programming the elephant to fight you or to pull you forward.
Words matter so much.
They really do. Stop telling yourself, I am trying to read more books. That is a verb. It requires effort. Start telling yourself, I am a reader.
That's a great example.
Stop saying, I want to exercise 3 times a week. Tell yourself, I am an athlete. Even if you are an incredibly slow athlete who only walks to the mailbox.
Hey, an athlete is an athlete.
Exactly. Because if you adopt the identity of an athlete, what does an athlete do on a rainy Tuesday? They figure out a way to move. It bypasses the debate over willpower because it becomes an issue of character.
And this extends powerfully into leadership and management, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, if you are trying to change your team's behavior, are you giving them a list of tasks verbs, or are you offering them a new compelling identity?
I see.
Are they employees executing a customer service protocol, or are they problem solvers? The label dictates the behavior.
That is profound. Okay, let's take stock of where we are. We have directed the writer by finding the bright spots so we aren't bogged down in an analysis paralysis.
Check.
We have motivated the elephant by shrinking the change down to the absolute lowest threshold to eliminate fear. And we've given the elephant a new identity to walk toward.
Check and check.
So the rider and the elephant are finally in total alignment. They're ready to go. But what if the path they're walking on is covered in ice, pitched at a 45-degree angle, and surrounded by wolves?
Then they're not going very far.
Right. Which brings us to the final and often the most completely ignored piece of the change framework.
Shaping the path.
Shaping the path. The path represents your external environment. And the profound insight here is that human beings consistently attribute behavior to personality or character when in reality, behavior is almost entirely driven by the situation.
Right. Psychologists call this the fundamental attribution error.
The fundamental attribution error.
Yes. We look at someone failing to change and say, oh, they just don't care enough. But often, they are simply operating in an environment that is practically designed to make them fail.
To illustrate just how violently our environment shapes our behavior, we have to talk about the popcorn study.
Oh, this is a classic.
This is easily one of the most memorable studies in the entire book. So researchers went to a movie theater and ran a deceptively simple experiment on people going in to watch a movie. They handed out free buckets of popcorn.
And this is crucial, it wasn't normal popcorn.
No, it was awful.
They had deliberately engineered the popcorn to be terrible. It was stale, it was rubbery, it had been sitting in a bag for weeks.
The book said it actually squeaked when you chewed it.
Yes, it squeaked. It was objectively unpleasant to eat.
So they took this gross popcorn and randomly gave people either a medium bucket or a massive giant bucket.
Just random assignment.
Right, and then they simply weighed the buckets after the movie to see how much people ate. The results completely destroy the idea that we are rational actors making conscious choices.
The numbers are shocking.
The people who were randomly handed the massive buckets ate 53% more of the gross stale popcorn than the people with the medium buckets. 53%.
Let's pause and really analyze the implications of that 53%. The people in the large bucket group did not have less willpower.
No.
They were not inherently more gluttonous. They were not hungrier. I mean, the popcorn was awful, and nobody was eating it for the culinary experience.
It didn't make a conscious decision to eat more.
Exactly. Their writer was completely bypassed. The sole variable that caused a 53% increase in consumption was the physical size of the cardboard container in their hands.
The container dictated the behavior. If you want people to eat less popcorn, you don't need a public health campaign about the dangers of stale snacks.
No, you don't need to teach them mindfulness eating.
You just give them a smaller bucket.
Exactly. This is the essence of choice architecture. Shaping the path is about designing your environment so that the good behavior is the absolute path of least resistance.
Then the bad behavior.
The bad behavior requires an immense amount of friction to achieve.
So it's about friction.
Yes. Remember our earlier discussion about ego depletion and willpower?
Right, the exhausted Tuesday writer.
Exactly. Willpower is finite. If you have to use willpower to resist a temptation every time you walk into your kitchen, your rider will eventually tire out and you will eat the junk food.
Inevitably.
Shaping the path means using your rider's energy once, just once, to change the environment so that you don't need willpower later.
It's about designing friction. We usually think of friction as a bad thing, but it is actually your best friend if you apply it to the right behaviors.
How do you mean?
Well, if your goal is to spend less time scrolling on your phone at night, willpower says, I will keep the phone on my nightstand, but I will be strong and not look at it.
Which requires constant energy.
Constant. Every time you wake up, you have to choose not to look. Shaping the path means you put the phone charger in the kitchen.
Ah, I love that.
Because if you want to scroll in bed, the friction is enormous. You have to physically get out of your warm bed, walk down the dark hallway, and stand in the cold kitchen.
And your elephant is lazy. It won't want to do that.
Exactly. You've used the elephant's laziness to your advantage.
And conversely, you remove all friction from the behaviors you do want to encourage.
Right. Smooth the path.
Yeah. Let's look at corporate environments. A company wants its different departments to collaborate more. So the CEO gives a passionate speech about unity.
Trying to motivate the elephant.
Right. But the engineering team is on the 4th floor, the marketing team is on the 6th floor, and to share a file, they have to go through a convoluted internet system that requires a VPN and 3 passwords.
The path is covered in mud.
It's terrible. So what happens? They just don't collaborate.
Not because they don't want to, but because the bucket is too hard to reach into.
Precisely. If you want them to collaborate, you don't need another motivational seminar. You take a sledgehammer to the environment.
Move them closer together.
You move them onto the same floor. You put them in the same Slack channel. You remove the process friction. Make the right behavior so automatic that it requires zero cognitive load to execute.
This is so powerful.
Yeah.
If we pull all of this together, the framework the Heaths have given us is incredibly liberating. It takes the heavy moralistic baggage out of self-improvement and turns it into an engineering problem.
It really does. It's so much more constructive than just feeling guilty.
Exactly. If you are failing to change, you don't need to hate yourself. You just need to diagnose the failure in the system.
It becomes a diagnostic checklist.
Like troubleshooting a car.
Exactly. You ask yourself, is my rider paralyzed by the enormity of the problem? If so, I need to stop analyzing the flaws and actively hunt for a bright spot to clone.
Right.
Is my elephant paralyzed by dread and anxiety? If so, I need to shrink the change down to an embarrassingly small step to build momentum, and I need to adopt an identity that aligns with my goal. Or, is my environment simply too hostile to my intentions? Do I need to shape the path by adding friction to bad habits and removing it from good ones?
The ultimate thesis here is a profound shift in perspective. What looked like a people problem is almost always a situation problem.
That is the core truth.
When you change the situation, when you clear the path, people change naturally. You don't have to force it.
You just guide them.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something tangible to think about regarding your own environment.
Bit of homework.
Just a little bit. We just talked about how a larger cardboard bucket unconsciously drove people to eat 53% more terrible popcorn.
It's a wild thought.
Look around the room you are sitting in right now. Look at your desk, your kitchen, your phone. What is one invisible bucket, a structural, physical element of your space that is silently removing friction from your absolute worst habit?
Ooh, that's a great question.
And more importantly, what specific action can you take tonight to completely destroy that bucket by tomorrow morning? Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning your environment, keep engineering your success, and we'll catch you next time.
So friends, those were the powerful insight that can truly transform your life. Remember, growth doesn't come from the just listening, but from applying this lesson. If you want to get 1% better every day, make sure to subscribe and follow BYK Book Summary. I am Amin, and I will see you in the next episode with another incredible story. Until then, read more, think deeper, and live with meaning.